We're going to go ahead and look at lesson 4.2. In this lesson, we're going to be working on an algebra skill called factoring, and it's related to quadratic equations and characteristics of the graph of a quadratic equation. So we're first going to go ahead and take a look at the actual skill of factoring a quadratic expression, or what we call a trinomial. And the first example is when we have a quadratic or trinomial when the a is equal to 1. That'll be our first thing. So we really don't have to do anything on step 1. It automatically goes to step 2. Your a is 1, your b is 4, and your c is -5. And what you're asking yourself is what times what equals -5? So you're looking for some number times some number equals -5, and that same number plus that number equals 4, the b part. And so what we're really looking for, what we do is we draw a little picture like this. This is to kind of organize our thinking. What times what equals -5, and added together gives me +4. And so to answer that question, if I put that in that, this times this is -5, this plus this equals 4. And once we have those numbers, we then have the factors, x minus 1, x plus 5. This equals that. And just to remind you, your check that we did it correctly is we can use double distributive property to show that this value goes back to this here. X times x is x squared, x times 5 is 5x, -1 times x is -1x, -1 times 5 is -5. And so you can see you end up with x squared plus 4x minus 5. You can see it matches up. So that's the skill we're going to practice. These are already done, but I'll talk you through them. So here's your x squared plus 2x minus 24, and you want to rewrite it as two factors. What times what is -24? Added together gives me 2. And so in that case, you end up with 6 and -4. That times that equals that, that plus that equals that. Once you have those values, you then have the factors, and that's called factoring. Here's another example. There's your a, b, and c. What times what is 14? Added together gives me -9, and you can see you get -7 and 2, and those become the factors. That's the rule in terms of how we write that. How we find these factors is through those numbers or process. Here's an extra example that I worked on. I just gave you that extra example so you can take a look at that. It just takes practice. Now, sometimes the problems look a little bit more difficult to do in terms of this number is not a 1. So what happens is you end up factoring out the greatest common factor. And I see 3 goes into each of those. And once you have that, you see you end up with a new expression with 3 factored out. And now that you have that, you would go ahead and then do what we had done on top. You get your 2 factors with -5 and 3. And so then this expression becomes this over here. Again, you can see where those 2 numbers, those become the factors. These are done, so you can take a look at your answer. That's an S and an S out of 5. Where we get those, and again, once you practice those, this one here is done. This one here, I factored the 5 out and then used that same process. So there's your answers for factoring.